Hi, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well. Welcome to Email Drip Campaigns Build Illuminate Online Recruit Drip. And our speaker for the day is Mr. Will Hull. If you guys have never interacted with Will Hull, you are in for a treat. He is very, very smart and knows a ton about this. So basically, what we're going to be talking about today is basically an email drip campaign, and that's basically a way to keep a campaign going, right? So dripping into your inbox, basically, right? So Will is a principal consultant here at Blackbaud. He works remote, like most of us do here. He is located in Reno, Nevada. He's a husband and a father of 3 kids. We were just talking about how his kids are Gen Z, which we're going to talk about. If you guys haven't seen the chat, I mentioned the fact that we have an awesome Gen Z report out, and I will link to the report in a second. But he also has his Master's of Public Administration from George Mason University, 18 years of experience in government, nonprofit, and private sector roles. He is very experienced in nonprofit communication strategies, online advocacy, online fundraising, marketing, and grassroots organization, as well as email marketing. I know this because I work with them quite a bit here at Blackbaud. A ton of other things, and that include Photoshop, web design, social media, Google Analytics, SEO, WordPress, e-commerce, Blackbaud Team Eraser, and Luminate Online. So, Will, with all of that being said, please feel free to tell us a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today and anything else about yourself that you might want the group to know here.
All right. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay? Can you hear me okay on your end? Oh, I see a head nod here from Nichols in the backstage area. Thank you so much. Again, yeah, my name is Will Hull. I've been with Blackbaud now since 2012, so I'm in my 12th year. Math, it's crazy. I'm in my 12th year here at Blackbaud, and I hope that you enjoy what I'm able to deliver today. So what I'm going to be doing today is share my screen here with you. Just a moment here, and let me go ahead and allow this. Yep, I have to allow it before I can share my presentation. All right, and just want to make sure that you can see my presentation okay there, Nichols? Yep, everything's on the stage. Fantastic. So today we're talking about the drip campaign. I use the word drip because it's usually you're dripping a bit of information, message to message inside of an inbox. Our goal is here today is to let me go ahead and move this particular tab over here so we're not seeing myself, so I can see what Nichols is doing on my end over there in case we need it. And any questions come in, I can read those on my other screen. But basically what we're doing today is talking about a drippable campaign, multiple messages, and making it automated. So we're not necessarily looking at doing this in a manual way. It's just as soon as somebody signs up, it signs them up for the series and they get an automated delivery. So there's a little bit about me. I'm based out of Reno, Nevada. It's my hometown. Also, that's where I live currently. Moved away for a couple years, then moved back. It's a black hole. It'll suck you in. If you ever come here to live, you'll try to leave and you'll have to keep coming back. Lake Tahoe's about 30-minute drive from here too, so that's a great thing to have nearby. So what we want to talk about today for the agenda is that for this, it's considered a customization. A very small part of it is customized. The other part is regular configurations, doable by any administrator on Luminate Online. But basically what we're going to be using is a custom profile field for in the database. We also want to make sure that who's ever implementing this Let me get this guy out of the way here. It looks like it's on the screen. Also, we're going to be HTML, CSS, and jQuery, touching jQuery slightly. You're going to be using a survey on Luminate, page builder, and a query to put it all together. So that's what we're looking at today. And without further ado, let's go to the next slide. So what you want to have is for each recurring delivery series that you set up, you want to use one custom profile field as a date value. So you're looking at month, day, year, or 4-digit year. But you want to use one of these per campaign. So for instance, how do I volunteer? That's considered one campaign. Or I'm interested in adoption. Let's say it's a humane society. I want to adopt an animal. What do I need to know? That might be another campaign. It's usually like canned answers that you might have as regular answers that might go to a supporter of yours that you find, oh, I could just copy and paste this, put it in an email and send it to them. You're doing that now with a drip campaign and you're getting people to sign up. And you'll find that this drives a lot of value. Notice here, I've also got the link in the chat message area for this download of the code itself. I've also got a copy of the presentation as a PDF in there. There's a README file that kind of walks you through how to deploy it as well. If any of you have any questions about that, my email will be at the end of the presentation, but will.hull@blackbaud.com, and it's HULL at the bottom of a boat. That's how I always say it. Next up with the survey, you're going to have 3 questions on that survey. You can also add more if you want to gather more information from the respondent. But at a minimum, you're looking at a first name, and if that's what you're going to use in your emails, like Dear Will. And you might also need an email address. You might also want to collect their last name. Sometimes people like their last names to be collected as well. And then you're going to have a date value question that would be mapped to this custom profile field. And I label it, and I use that label with jQuery to find that question and hide it on page load. But I usually use the words date of submission there to capture today's date when somebody fills out a field. And then it's optional to add a CAPTCHA to your form or not. This usually will prevent bots, scripts from submitting the form to test whether or not you're adhering to best practices with email. Sometimes they find unprotected forms and they'll enter in an email address, and that could inadvertently be a spam trap that's entering your list. So a CAPTCHA usually helps prevent against that, at least to a high degree. Not completely, but for the most part it does. So I'd recommend putting a CAPTCHA on your survey as well. So for the page builders themselves, you're going to be using that for the HTML code, like, hey, how do I volunteer, hypothetically, is the series. You're also going to embed the survey on that page builder page. You'll notice on the screenshot there on the 4th bullet, you'll see S28 embed and then a survey ID number. You'll also see other S51 S tags here that are between 2 brackets just at the bottom of that. Those are pulling in other page builder page code, and that's pulling in the styles and the scripts so that you have those on separate isolated page builder pages so that you can style these. And if you ever need to have, for instance, another administrator come in and tweak the language that's just above your form, you can easily do that. And then you would publish these page builder pages, all 3 of them. So once you've collected data off of your form, again, I'm going to show all this on screen for the actual live version of it in a second here, but I'm just kind of going through my presentation just a little bit so you can kind of see the breakdown of what happens. After we get the page builder page set up, we would also want to set up a query for the data that we're collecting. The very first bullet here on my slide is talking about what I usually put on a query, and this is for any query where I might be using it for populating a group to send an email. This actually finds good email addresses that are current subscribers that are not currently hard bouncing or marked as removed in your Luminate Online database. This will find any regular record that is still essentially a valid record. Then we add one more line to it. How long has it been since they filled out that survey? And in this case, we're capturing today's date as a part of that survey. And we are saying, okay, since that date, I want to wait 1 day, send the first message, wait 3 days, send the second message, wait 7 days, send the third message, or however long your cadence would be. You would set up one query for each one of those, for each message that you have with your campaign. Let's say it's a 3-part campaign. You would set up 3 separate queries, and each one of them in that highlighted area right down here on the screen that I'm hovering around with my mouse, that would change. So like, for instance, that field that's collecting the date, 1 day, 3 days, 5 days, and you would just make copy after you make the first one. You would make a copy for the second message, make a copy for the third message, and so on and so forth. Notice here on this screen here, we've got the query pulled up and how we're setting it all up. Once you add the date field, you'll set up something that's relative to the number of days prior to today in which that field has a date value. So is it yesterday? Is it the day before? That's what we're looking at there. And again, this would be underneath the field type of additional information. That's where your custom database fields live. And then whatever we name that custom database field. We'll talk more about the database field in a moment. Then the query itself, we would save it. Then we would run it for the first time. And then on the next screen, once we've ran it, you'll see two options in the top right, use query or run query. When you click the use query, you can create a group off of that, and that'll be a rebuildable query-based group that you're then using with your recurring deliveries, where you'll set those to run on a recurrence, and you'll ask that while you're setting up your delivery to rebuild the group at delivery. So in this case here, this is what we're talking about with the delivery. This is a recurring delivery screenshots, a couple of them. When you're in your email campaign, you can either access the recurring delivery on the messages or deliveries tab. You would build your email message like you normally would. You would just write all your content out, put all your links in there that you need to have. But in the left-hand sidebar on the messages or deliveries tab, after you've approved that message, I'm operating underneath the assumption we all know how to build an email message here. So keep in mind, I won't be covering that part. But once you've approved the message, you'll then use that setup recurring delivery in the left-hand sidebar, either on the messages or deliveries tab. Once you set it up, the very first step is the most critical. You'll say, okay, what day does this start? How often does it go out? And how long does it run? So in this case, we're going to run as far out as we can. Usually it's 10 years at a time. So in this case, we would say December 31st of 2034 instead of 2024. That's in the screenshot. We would set that 10 years out. Also, we can choose whether or not we want to send a copy. The send a copy here is whether or not this person has received this email before. Do we want to send it again? For instance, if I came back and I filled out this form again, it would reset that date value in that field, and then it would start that series all over again. If I fill out the survey on, for instance, how do I become a volunteer, and you send me a drip series on it, if you wanted to, you could say, okay, well, we don't want to send that again. They've already received it. But you could also do it for, hey, I got that series. I want to sign up for it again. I want to get those emails again. You can have that send a copy there if you'd like to. Usually the send a copy is for reminders and notifications like happy anniversary. It's been a year since your last gift, or hey, your credit card's about to expire. You should probably update that. And if somebody does update it, they can then get that email again once their credit card's about to expire again. But in this case, we're going to do that. I would say, it's up to you whether or not you want to choose that send a copy option, but then we're going to move on to the next step where we select the groups that we set up just with the query. And then the final step is to enable it. And then again, it's all relative to your cadence on how often you want to send it. But if you're doing your day in which that date value is equals 1 day prior to today, then you want to use the everyday option. However, if you're doing a range between, let's say, for instance, falls on or after 7 days prior to today, but falls on or before, let's say, 1 day prior to today or 0 days, then at that point, it would then look for it once a week. If somebody falls in that 1 week range, you would say every week on a certain day of the week. Let's say every Wednesday, you might be sending out an email from this drip campaign. But I usually recommend an equals because it's a lot easier to manage. Because then you'll know, hey, it goes out on day one. Regardless if they filled it out on a Sunday, a Friday, doesn't matter. They're going to get that email the next day. All right, so I'll go back to this question slide in a moment. We'll kind of break it down here on, let me get back to my Firefox browser here so we can pull up. Where is it at here? Maybe it defaulted to this. Okay, so inside of Luminate here I am inside of our instance of Luminate. First off with the survey here, we want to make sure, actually, let's go to the first step here, which is our database configuration. So this is an accessible area underneath setup, database configuration. If you don't have access to this, you can always set up a Blackbaud support case and ask them, hey, can you please set up a custom date field and label it as X? And they'll do that for you. When you get here, if you have access to this, you can also ask for access to this. There are, I would say, maybe make 1 or 2 people, not many people at your organization, an admin here, but it's called an advanced site administrator is the access that you would need to get into here if you'd rather manage this on your own. But in this case, underneath additional information is where our custom database fields reside. So if you expand this, we have a couple of these in our instance, our sandbox instance here. But you'll notice one of these date fields, number 9 here, is set up with the label sign up date. We've turned it on. We've said, hey, do we want to allow the user to see this or not? I can turn it on and off if they visit their profile update page on Luminate. And then whether the admin can see it, whether the admin can change it. So if you want to allow your administrators to change the value in this box so that they can reset a series for somebody or something like that, you could potentially do that here. But you would set it up, give it a label, hit save, and then that sets up your custom field. The second step here is setting up your survey. So inside of the survey here, what matters most is the questions step here. So in the questions, notice here I've only got three questions. I got a constituent registration information question type. That's underneath the add questions button here. When you're inside of here, you can choose as many fields as you like. There's the basic fields here that you can grab, first name, last name, email. In this case, I could add others. On the additional fields, I can grab other information like gender, occupation, phone number, whatever else you want to grab, you can grab that here. And then notice here, I'm defaulting to no, just opt them in automatically. You'll see that in the jQuery that I actually relabeled the disclaimer text to say whatever I wanted to say on the page in the jQuery. However, you could say, display it as a checkbox. It has to be checked in order to start receiving the email, so it could be checked by default. And it could say something like this, I'd like to receive emails from blank. You could do that too. But again, you're operating underneath the assumption these people want these emails. They're filling out this form. They're saying yes to it as an implied consent here. And we're just basically putting in a disclaimer that if you fill out the form, you're going to start receiving emails. When it comes to processing and layout, this is pretty important for new users. You'll see new constituents. Do we want them to be logged in or not? You can choose that if you'd like. It's just not dependent upon this particular survey, whether they should be logged in. I would say generate a new username and password for those people so it doesn't display on the form what do you want your username and password to be. And then for existing records, I always recommend this third option here where it updates the record if it's an improvement. Usually that is like if you have a blank field in the record, like a last name field, and they don't have that yet, and they fill in the last name on the survey, it'll fill that in for them. But that's usually my settings for this.
Hey, Will, there's a question that we have from Katie. Are there native database fields you consider leveraging for triggered messages? You can obviously use creation date for welcome series, but she's cautious of introducing a ton of custom fields. Her head's at CC expiry, for example, or maybe other forms of prelapse I might not be thinking about.
Well, in this case here, for our uses, we're just using the custom field with just this one question, the date of submission. So when you're setting up your question, it's just relative to how am I mapping it. And in this case, when you do the date of submission, we're doing select an existing field. Which one is it in my database that I want to map this response to? And then you would select that one that you want the response to. So it's all relative to what information are you trying to collect from these folks that are filling out this form. And then, for instance, like, if you're interested in volunteering, what's your preferred your volunteering window? Afternoons, evenings, weekends. That kind of thing might be a question where I might use a field, like, for instance, a custom text field to select that as maybe a drop-down selection or maybe a checkbox or a radio button selection where I might map that answer to that field. Does that make sense, I think? I sure hope so. I've got about 11 minutes left, so I'm just trying to get through what I can here.
Yeah.
But that's a great question. All right, so for this particular question, the date question, this is critical, date of submission. I'm leveraging that in my code. You can develop code however you like, but the code that I'm sharing with you leverages this label. The jQuery looks for this label. Then what it does is it says, go up to the top row of that where that label is, hide that field. So you'll notice when you load your form, here's an example of one where it's date of submission. Notice it's showing here and pre-populating. If I refresh the form here, it loads the form. And when jQuery loads, as soon as it loads, it's probably taking a second here, it'll load it and hide that field by finding that label. So that's how it works. And I have a couple other examples here. So here's like a table-based version without a page wrapper. You'll notice it loads for a second, right? Date of submission, and then it will close as soon as the jQuery loads. So that's something that you can do here. All right. So this is critical. It's critical to the jQuery that you label it a certain way. In my case, date of submission needs to be the label. All right. The other thing is CAPTCHA. If you want to add it, again, you would just click add questions, add CAPTCHA, and then you can add the label, whatever it is. In our case with the CAPTCHA, notice here it's doing the reCAPTCHA version 3. If you don't have this turned on your site and it's like the mixed letters and numbers in a box here, you can ask Blackbaud support to enable reCAPTCHA version 3 on your instance of Luminate, and it will use this option where there's like none of the, like, pick the fire hydrants or pick the number of motorcycles or bicycles or cars or something. All of that doesn't show up. What it's doing is just detecting whether or not it's a human visitor on the page, and you don't have to worry about all that slowing down the processing of the form. Okay, now hidden in the background again with the jQuery, it's just hiding that. So you'll notice here I'm going to unhide it real quick in my code. And then I also have some other additional styles here that hides the month, the day, and the year. But that would be where it's at when it loads, the jQuery picks up on it. Okay, next up, our page builders. So you'll notice here I've got 2 of them. One of them is for the regular classic version of a survey. The other one is for the responsive version of a survey. So it's depending on which one you want. I've written code for both of it, so they're both included in the files. But in this case here, where that's set is on the survey itself. When you identify the survey, on step 1, there's an option here that says, do we want to use the responsive layout? That's what that is right there. So depending on whichever one you want to use, the code's built for both, but that's what you can choose to do. So in that case here, let's look at the page builder just for this first one here, sample reg. If I edit the content here, this is like a live edit. There's my code. I'm going to bring it over onto the screen so we can take a look at it. So you'll see it looks just like what I shared with you on the presentation, where we're basically writing out all the HTML at the top, right up through here. So all that's regular HTML. What's the benefit of this series? Why is it here? Why should I sign up? All that type of stuff. You're expressing the value in getting this series. I've also written in if somebody's logged in or not into this code. So if they're logged in, it'll display their first name. If not, it'll display, I believe, the word supporter and the organization name that displays in the top right-hand corner of your screen when you're logged into Luminate. For instance, let's say it's Boys Town supporter would show up here. And then we also are embedding a survey onto the page. There's the survey, but how do I find this number? How do I find my survey ID number to put this code in here? Well, while you're editing your survey, I'm going to go back to it real quick. While you're editing your survey, you'll notice it shows survey ID and then whatever that ID number is right up at the top there. So you can grab that and use that as a part of that code. Okay. Next thing is you can build out several different style sheets and scripts. I'm actually going to go to the script file. The style sheet is just basic styles like what's my headers, what's the color of my header, what's my font family for my paragraphs, what's my list items. You could have that all pick up through your page wrapper, or you could style it specifically to your specs on that style sheet. It also helps control some of those fields on like their drop shadow or borders and stuff like that that might show up on your survey. But I'm going to go to the scripts because that's the most important one here. So let's go back to this. And I'm going to go search for that script file so we can show you that, because that's probably the most important piece of this. I'm going to open it up to the editor so we can look at the code there. All right, let me zoom in just a little bit so we can see it better. Expand my window. Okay, so what I'm basically doing with my script here is I'm establishing a no conflict and opening up the code. And then you have all your codes underneath this. The very first thing is just establishing a numbering system for each of my tables. So if you needed to isolate like this table, I want this class on it or this style on it, you can do that. It's just adding increasing number to each table. It'll be table dash whatever it is, table dash 1, table dash 2, so you can isolate them. Down here is edit the text below to customize your email opt-in disclaimer. So this is your opt-in text that would replace the default disclaimer. So you can have it say whatever you want, like fill out this form and we'll send you how to become a volunteer. And on top of that, we'll also sign you up for our newsletter to where you'll be in the know about everything there is to know about us, right? I'm also hiding the label of about you above the first name, last name, and email fields. You could choose to keep that on there if you want, but this just loads and hides it. Next up, we're looking at the actual date of submission. If the date of submission is on the form, I'm basically establishing a variable of the current month, day, and year. And then when the page loads, it's looking for those fields and it's actually updating those values automatically on page load to say, for instance, today, June 6th of 2024, would pre-fill that field so that when they hit submit, it captures today's date and puts it into that date field and then hides that field. This right here down below it is where it hides. This is where it hides for regular classic surveys. This is where it loads it and hides it for the for responsive surveys. So depending on which version you're using, it finds it and it hides it. So I've written both for that because they actually have different ways in which it's laid out on the page in the code. Lastly here, this is if you wanted to, this is where it would hide the about you on the classic survey if you want to hide that about you label. So it's a very simple script. Grabs today's current date. So here's the current month, current year. These are 3 separate variables. You could actually break these onto their own line. So I could have it like this. I just pressed enter here where I could put them onto their own row or whatever it needs to be to grab those values. But this is actually the most critical piece here that fills in today's date on those fields. All right. And then the next thing we do after we get that in place and we get the scripts in place, we load up the form is we then build out our query. So remember we had the screenshots of this in the presentation where you've got our query. You would name it anything you want. In this case, mine's the Will's Fantastic Email Drip Campaign Query. I've got those 3 values here. Again, underneath the accepts email, that's underneath email right here. Accept email, you would hit add field clause equals true. Email status, it's underneath email. Email status is right there, and you would say not equal to, removed. And then you have here, or not equal to, excuse me, bad hard bounce. And then the last one here is underneath system. So you would look underneath system here, and you would look at active status, not equal to removed is what you want to use for that one. And then again, you would save the query, you would run the query. Once you run the query, you then use the query. It pops up a window here where you want to use this option right here, create a group. If you use any other option like add results to an existing group or mail merge, it's not going to work properly because when you create a group, it's going to create a rebuildable query-based group, right? And then lastly, when you go to send your email, let's hypothetically say, I'm just going to pick one here. Let's actually look at this guy. We're going to go to the messages or deliveries tab, set up a recurring delivery. You'd pick one that's approved already. Let's hypothetically say it was this guy. You set it for a date and time that's in the future. So whatever that time is that you set here on this one is the time that it will send each recurring delivery. So tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day would all be at 8 a.m. And it's local to your time zone that's listed inside of Luminate every day. And then you set it as far out as you can. Set it and forget it. You may have seen that Ronco chicken roaster commercial here, infomercial back in the 90s. I put a little screen of that in there. Don't know if you saw it. And then you hit next, and then you pick your groups that you want to send it to. And if your group is rebuildable, on the very next step here, you'd select your group rebuild options and you select your target audience. You also just verify what's our date and time, how long is it going to go for. And then on your rebuild step, on this step here, you would have a series of check boxes that you want to make sure it's critical. You want to check that box to rebuild that group at delivery. It's going to kick people out every day, move people in, kick people out, move people in. Okay. And then lastly, once you've completed all of that, you just hit next here and enable that delivery. If you want to verify that your delivery is set up correctly, what you do is you go over to the email calendar tab. Again, that's after you enable it. But you go to your email calendar tab and you just verify that you now see that delivery going every single day on this calendar going forward. And you can keep going a couple months and you'll still see it there. But that's how you verify that it's set up correctly. All right. So now we're able to answer any other questions. Are there any other questions? That's basically all I had to show today. But if we have some more questions, I can stay on for a minute or two and we can help answer them. All right. Well, seeing as there's no questions, this is my email address. This is my LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me, absolutely. You can shoot me an email if you get to deploying it and you're having trouble deploying it, something's not working right. I'm your guy. I can come out and take a look at it. Just let me know, or you could ask a question about it. Hey, I deployed all that jQuery. Something's not working. It could be perhaps maybe the jQuery library needs to be updated on your instance of Luminate or the instance on the page that you're on. Could be maybe a missing semicolon or a comma. Who knows? But that's pretty much it on how to set up a drip series. And keep in mind, this exists for anybody who's been in the database for 1 day, 5 years, doesn't matter. The moment they fill that out, it triggers that series to run based off of the date in which they submitted the form.
Thanks so much. And I also wanted to just mention that I just launched the survey. So if you guys don't mind taking a few minutes or seconds actually and just answering those 4 questions for Will, that would be awesome. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, guys. I hope to hear from you, or at least view the feedback. That'd be great. And if you guys are going to BBCon, I might be delivering this in person as well. So feel free to take a look at that session at BBCon, or invite your friends to it, or other organizations that might be considering the same thing. I'll be there giving this as a presentation as one of my 2 that I'm going to be doing at BBCon in September. Right.
Super.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Will.
We'll take care. We'll see you.